The Zephyrian Empire stretched across 17 galaxies, their crystalline ships gleaming like scattered diamonds against the cosmic void. For 3 million years, they had been the undisputed rulers of known space, their psychic abilities so advanced that entire star systems would surrender at the mere mention of their name. The Zephyrians stood 12 feet tall, their translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent veins that carried not blood, but pure energy. Their 4 arms could manipulate matter at the molecular level, and their minds could reach across light years to crush the will of lesser species. Emperor Vexithara floated in the center of the Grand Command Nexus, his consciousness linked to every Zephyrian ship in the fleet. Around him, holographic displays showed the latest conquest. The Arcturus system had fallen in mere hours, its inhabitants now serving as energy sources for the Empire's continued expansion. The Emperor's satisfaction rippled through the psychic network, felt by every one of his trillion subjects across the cosmos. "My lord," came the melodic thought voice of Admiral Kethmoros, "our scouts have detected an anomaly in the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy. There appears to be a previously unknown species that has achieved faster-than-light travel." Vexithara's interest piqued. New species were rare these days, most civilizations having been absorbed into the Empire long ago. "Show me," he commanded. The holographic display shifted, revealing a small blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The planet teemed with life. But what caught the Emperor's attention were the crude metal vessels scattered throughout the local solar system. They were primitive by Zephyrian standards, but the fact that such a young species had achieved space travel was curious. "They call themselves humans," Kethmoros continued. "Carbon-based bipeds, average lifespan of roughly 80 standard cycles. No apparent psychic abilities, no energy manipulation capabilities. Their technology appears to be entirely mechanical and chemical-based." Vexithara's 4 arms gestured dismissively. "Primitives, send a single harvester ship. Their world will make an adequate mining colony." "Yes, my lord. Shall we offer them the standard surrender terms?" "No," the Emperor decided after a moment's consideration. "They are too primitive to understand the honor we would bestow upon them. Simply take what resources we need." The harvester's ship, Sorrow's Edge, departed from the main fleet 3 days later. Captain Velnaris commanded a crew of 50 Zephyrians, more than enough to subdue an entire planet of primitives. The ship itself was a marvel of Zephyrian engineering, 2 miles long, constructed from living crystal that could repair itself and adapt to any threat. Its psychic amplification chambers could project mind-crushing waves across entire continents. As the Sorrow's Edge approached Earth's solar system, Velnaris was already planning the harvest. The planet's electromagnetic signatures indicated a population of roughly 8 billion humans scattered across 7 continents. A standard psychic bombardment would render them all unconscious within minutes, after which automated drones could begin the extraction process. "Captain," reported his sensor officer, "we're detecting multiple primitive vessels in the outer system. They appear to be conducting some sort of mining operation around the gas giants." "Ignore them," Velnaris ordered. "Focus on the home world." What the Zephyrians didn't know was that humanity had been watching the cosmos for decades, listening for signs of other intelligent life. When deep space monitoring stations detected the approaching alien vessel, alerts flashed across every human military installation on and off Earth. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Base, studying the tactical display with growing unease. The alien ship was massive, its energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. But what worried her most was its apparent disregard for stealth. It approached openly, broadcasting its presence across multiple spectrums. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Morrison from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the bogey. It's strange, ma'am. Not radio or laser. Something else entirely." Put it through. The command center filled with an alien presence that pressed against their minds like a physical weight. Most of the human crew staggered under the psychic assault, but Chen remained standing, her jaw clenched in determination. "Primitive creatures," came the alien voice, speaking directly into their thoughts. "Your world belongs to the Zephyrian Empire now. Do not resist, and your deaths will be swift." "Well," Chen said aloud, her voice steady despite the psychic pressure. "That was rude." She activated the emergency protocols that humanity had spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. Across the solar system, human ships changed course, converging on predetermined coordinates. On Earth, massive underground bunkers sealed their entrances as military forces took defensive positions. "Sir," Morrison reported, "the alien ship is powering up some kind of weapon array." Chen nodded grimly. "All stations, this is Admiral Chen. Operation Ragnarok is now in effect. Show these aliens what humanity does to uninvited guests." Captain Velnaris was puzzled by the humans' response. Their crewed vessels were actually moving to intercept his ship rather than fleeing in terror. Even more strange, several humans on the planet below seemed to be resisting his psychic probes. It shouldn't have been possible for such primitive minds to withstand even a fraction of Zephyrian mental power. "Perhaps their neural structure is different than our databases suggest," mused his science officer. "No matter. Increase psychic output by 50% and target their largest population centers." The Sorrow's Edge unleashed its full psychic might upon Earth. Waves of mental energy that had broken the will of countless species crashed against the planet's surface. In major cities around the world, humans collapsed as the alien thoughts invaded their minds. But not all of them. In fact, a surprising number remained standing, their faces contorted with pain, but their spirits unbroken. "Impossible," Velnaris whispered. "No species should be able to resist at this level." That's when the human counterattack began. The first missiles arrived while Velnaris was still trying to understand how the humans were resisting. They were primitive chemical rockets, barely capable of faster-than-light travel, but there were hundreds of them. The Sorrow's Edge's crystalline hull absorbed the nuclear explosions with ease, automatically adapting to the thermal and radiation damage. But the missiles weren't the real attack. They were cover. Hidden within the missile swarm were smaller objects that the Zephyrian sensors had dismissed as debris. These objects weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were humans. Sarah Chen had volunteered for the first boarding mission herself, along with 20 other volunteers. Each wore a modified EVA suit equipped with cutting tools, explosives, and enough oxygen for 6 hours. They had trained for this scenario in secret facilities across the solar system, knowing that one day humanity might face a technologically superior foe that could only be defeated through direct action. The human boarders landed on the Zephyrian ship's hull during the confusion of the missile barrage. Chen's team immediately began cutting through the crystalline surface with plasma torches, while the ship's automated defenses tried to adapt to this unexpected form of attack. Inside the Sorrow's Edge, alarms began sounding as the hull integrity monitors registered multiple breaches. Velnaris couldn't believe what he was seeing. The primitive humans were actually cutting through his ship's living hull faster than it could regenerate. "Send security teams to repel the boarders," he ordered. But as Zephyrian warriors rushed through the ship's corridors, they discovered something that shook them to their cores. The humans weren't just resisting their psychic abilities, they were fighting back with a ferocity that defied all logic. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez had grown up in the slums of New Angeles, where survival meant learning to fight before you learned to walk. When the alien thoughts tried to invade his mind, he did what he'd always done when someone tried to break him. He got angry. The Zephyrian warrior that confronted him in the ship's corridor was 12 feet of crystalline perfection, its 4 arms crackling with energy. Its psychic assault should have reduced Rodriguez to a drooling vegetable. Instead, the human sergeant roared with primal fury and charged. The Zephyrian's energy blast caught Rodriguez in the chest, but his ceramic body armor absorbed most of the impact. Before the alien could fire again, Rodriguez was on top of it, his combat knife finding gaps in the crystalline structure. The Zephyrian's psychic screams of pain and confusion echoed through the ship as it died beneath the human's relentless assault. Similar scenes played out across the Sorrow's Edge, as human borders proved that technological superiority meant nothing in close quarters, combat against an enemy that refused to surrender. Captain Velnaris watched in horror as his crew reports came in. 50 humans had boarded his ship, 50 primitives against 3,000 Zephyrians, and somehow the humans were winning. Every security team he sent was either destroyed or retreated in confusion, unable to comprehend how such inferior beings could resist their psychic dominance. "Captain," his engineering officer reported, "the humans have reached the primary power core. They're placing some kind of explosive charges." "Activate the emergency teleport systems," Velnaris ordered. "Evacuate all crew to the secondary ships." But as the Zephyrians began teleporting away, they discovered that the humans had been planning for this possibility as well. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the ship's communication system, somehow having tapped into their network. "Attention, Zephyrian vessel. You came to our world uninvited. You threatened our people. You tried to break our spirits." Her voice was calm, professional, but underneath lay a core of absolute determination. "Now you're going to learn why humans have conquered every environment on our planet, from the deepest oceans to the vacuum of space. We don't give up, we don't surrender, and we don't forgive." The charges detonated. The Sorrow's Edge split in half, its crystalline structure unable to maintain integrity after the humans had systematically destroyed its key support systems. The explosion lit up Earth's sky like a second sun, visible to every human on the planet's surface. But this was only the beginning. In the depths of space, Emperor Vexithara felt the death of the Harvester ship through the psychic network. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced in 3 million years of conquest. For the first time since ascending to the throne, he felt something he had nearly forgotten: uncertainty. "Summon the War Council," he commanded. "It appears these humans require a more direct approach." On Earth, Admiral Chen stood in the ruins of Luna Base, which had been partially destroyed by the alien ship's initial psychic assault. Around her, human rescue teams worked to save the survivors, while construction crews began immediate repairs. The message from the alien emperor had been clear. This was not over. But as Chen looked up at the debris field that had once been the Zephyrian ship, she felt something the aliens had not anticipated. Not fear, not despair, but a grim satisfaction. Humanity had been tested, and they had not been found wanting. The most powerful species in the cosmos had just learned that there was something more dangerous than psychic abilities or energy manipulation. There was human stubbornness, human ingenuity, and the simple human refusal to quit, no matter how impossible the odds. The war was just beginning, but the Zephyrians had already lost something irreplaceable: their aura of invincibility. And in the vast cosmos, word was beginning to spread to other subjugated species that the mighty Zephyrian Empire had been challenged by a young species called humanity. For the first time in 3 million years, the slaves of the Empire began to hope. The Grand War Council of the Zephyrian Empire had not convened in 12,000 years. The last time had been during the rebellion of the Thornak Confederacy. a brief and ultimately futile uprising that lasted exactly 17 minutes before the entire species surrendered. Now, in the crystal cathedral that served as the Empire's war room, 500 of the most powerful Zephyrians in existence gathered to discuss the impossible, how a primitive species had destroyed one of their ships. Emperor Vexithara floated at the center of the assembly, his luminescent form pulsing with barely contained rage. Around him, the greatest military minds of the Empire shared their collective consciousness, analyzing every moment of the Sorrow's Edge's final battle. The humans appear to possess an unusual resistance to psychic manipulation, reported War Master Thexandra, her forearms weaving complex patterns as she displayed tactical data. Initial estimates suggested they would succumb within seconds. Instead, several thousand individuals showed complete immunity. General Crixmore, veteran of 1,000 conquered worlds, projected his confusion into the shared mental space. Their technology is primitive, barely beyond chemical propulsion. Yet they fought with a coordination that suggests advanced battlefield intelligence. They boarded our ship, Admiral Zelquis added, his mental voice tinged with disbelief. Using their own bodies as weapons, it defies all tactical logic. Emperor Vexithara's psychic presence expanded, silencing the assembly. Enough analysis of their methods. The question is simple. How do we crush them completely? War Master Thexandra's battle-scarred features hardened. Send the 7th Battle Fleet, 300 ships, 2 million warriors. Even if every human possesses their strange resistance, they cannot stand against such overwhelming force. No, the Emperor decided. This species has already proven they are unpredictable. We will send the 1st Battle Fleet. 5,000 ships, every warrior, every weapon, every psychic amplifier in our arsenal. When we finish with Earth, there will be nothing left but cosmic dust. On Earth, 3 months after the first contact, humanity was transforming itself into a war machine with frightening efficiency. The knowledge that hostile aliens existed had unified the species in ways that politicians and philosophers had deemed impossible. Every nation contributed resources, every scientist worked around the clock, and every military force trained for the coming storm. Dr. Rebecca Vasquez stood in the newly constructed Research Complex Alpha, built deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, teams of scientists worked with salvaged pieces of Zephyrian technology, trying to understand how their crystalline ships functioned. The alien materials were unlike anything in Earth's periodic table, seeming to exist in a state somewhere between matter and energy. The structure appears to be quantum-locked, she explained to Admiral Chen, who had been promoted to Supreme Allied Commander after her actions during the first battle. It's not just technology. It's almost like it's alive. The crystal matrix responds to electrical impulses, but also to something else we can't measure. Their psychic abilities, Chen guessed. Exactly. But here's the interesting part. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing molecular diagrams. The crystal becomes increasingly unstable when exposed to what we're calling psychic static, the mental chaos that occurs during intense emotional states. Chen raised an eyebrow. Are you saying our emotions can damage their ships? In a way, yes. The Zephyrians built their technology to work in harmony with disciplined, focused psychic energy. Human thoughts are messier, more chaotic. It's like trying to run a precision laser through a storm. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. Dr. Vasquez, I think you've just given us our edge. Meanwhile, across the solar system, human engineers worked feverishly to prepare defenses. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a fortress, with hidden weapons platforms anchored to every large rock. The gas giant Jupiter now hosted a ring of space stations, each one armed with the most powerful weapons humanity could devise. Captain James Sullivan commanded Battle Station Olympus, one of 12 massive defensive platforms orbiting Earth. His crew consisted of volunteers from 37 nations, all united by the knowledge that they stood between humanity and extinction. Sullivan himself was a former cargo hauler who had never expected to command anything larger than a transport ship, but the war had promoted many unlikely heroes. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Yang from the sensor station, "deep space monitors are detecting massive gravitational distortions. Something big is coming out of hyperspace." Sullivan nodded, having expected this moment for months. "All stations, red alert. Patch me through to command." Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communication system. "All defensive platforms. This is command. Implement the Beethoven Protocol immediately." The Beethoven Protocol was humanity's secret weapon, developed after Dr. B. Vasquez's discovery about psychic static. Every human ship and station was equipped with speakers that would broadcast music, human voices, and carefully selected audio designed to maximize emotional chaos. If human thoughts could disrupt Zephyrian technology, they intended to weaponize their own humanity. The Zephyrian First Battle Fleet emerged from hyperspace like a silver tide, 5,000 ships arranged in perfect formation. Each vessel was a work of art, its crystalline hull reflecting starlight in brilliant patterns. At the fleet's heart was the Emperor's will, a massive dreadnought that stretched for 50 miles and contained enough firepower to crack planets. Fleet Commander Zarthek surveyed the human solar system with cold satisfaction. The primitives had built a few defensive platforms, but nothing that could threaten even a single Zephyrian destroyer. This would be a massacre, swift and absolute. "Begin the cleansing," he ordered. "Target all human installations. Leave nothing alive." The first wave of psychic energy erupted from the Zephyrian fleet like an invisible tsunami. It was a coordinated assault by 5 million of the Empire's finest psychic warriors, designed to instantly lobotomize every human in the solar system. The wave crashed against Earth's atmosphere with enough mental force to shatter the minds of entire civilizations. And then something unprecedented happened. Instead of human screams of terror and surrender, the Zephyrian psychic network was flooded with something they had never encountered: defiant human music. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, performed by the London Philharmonic Orchestra, roared across space from 1,000 different transmitters. But it wasn't just music. It was pure human emotion, amplified and focused into a weapon of chaos. The opening notes were accompanied by the voice of Admiral Chen herself. "This is Earth. We received your message. Our response is no." The psychic static hit the Zephyrian fleet like a sledgehammer. Ships that had sailed between galaxies for millennia suddenly found their navigation systems scrambled by human laughter. Crystal hulls began developing stress fractures as random human thoughts about football games, childhood memories, and pizza preferences interfered with their quantum matrices. Commander Zarthek staggered in his command chamber as alien emotions crashed against his mind. How could these primitives generate such chaotic mental energy? The symphony alone was bad enough, but underneath it was something far worse. The sound of 8 billion humans who had decided they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. "All ships, increase psychic dampening fields," he ordered. "Begin bombardment of the third planet." But as the Zephyrian energy weapons powered up, they discovered that human chaos had another effect. The crystalline technology that had dominated the galaxy for 3 million years was having trouble maintaining coherence. Energy blasts, meant to vaporize continents instead, scattered randomly through space, creating beautiful but harmless light shows. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're experiencing cascading system failures across the fleet. The human psychic emissions are interfering with our technology." That's when the human counterattack began in earnest. From the asteroid belt came waves of missiles, each one broadcasting human voices singing songs from every culture on Earth. The warheads weren't nuclear, they were loaded with speakers programmed to broadcast the most emotionally chaotic content humanity could produce. Children laughing, lovers arguing, crowds cheering at sporting events, and above it all, a recording of a human child asking, "Why?" The missiles struck the Zephyrian fleet like needles, finding the gaps in armor. Each impact sent waves of emotional chaos through the targeted ships, causing their living crystal hulls to convulse and fracture. Ships that had conquered star systems found themselves crippled by the sound of a baby crying or a grandmother telling bedtime stories. Commander Zarthek watched in horror as his magnificent fleet began to tear itself apart. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No species should be able to weaponize their own thoughts." But humanity wasn't finished. From Jupiter's orbital stations came something even worse than missiles. Boarding pods filled with human Marines who had spent months training to fight in the chaotic mental environment of Zephyrian ships. Each Marine carried speakers built into their armor, broadcasting random human thoughts and memories designed to maximize psychic interference. Sergeant Maria Santos had grown up in São Paulo, where she learned to fight in favela street wars before joining the Brazilian Navy. Now she found herself cutting through the hull of an alien dreadnought, her armor broadcasting her grandmother's recipe for feijoada, while her plasma torch melted through crystalline armor. The Zephyrian defenders who met her charge were already disoriented by the psychic chaos. Their energy weapons misfired, their coordination broke down, and their legendary discipline crumbled under the assault of random human memories about birthday parties and first kisses. Santos moved through the alien ship like a force of nature, her squad following behind as they systematically destroyed every critical system they could find. The Zephyrians tried to stop them with psychic attacks, but the Marines' minds were too chaotic, too filled with human experiences, for the aliens to get a grip on. "Alpha Team to command," Santos reported as her squad reached the ship's power core. "We're in position to light the birthday cake." "Happy birthday, Earth," came Admiral Chen's voice over the radio. "Make a wish." The explosions lit up space as human boarding parties successfully destroyed 12 Zephyrian capital ships. Each detonation sent shockwaves through the alien fleet's psychic network, spreading panic and confusion among warriors who had never known defeat. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vasquez had been monitoring the battle from her underground laboratory, analyzing how the Zephyrian technology responded to different types of human emotion. What she discovered changed everything. The aliens' psychic network was designed to amplify and share experiences among their fleet. It was their greatest strength, allowing perfect coordination across vast distances. It was also their greatest weakness. "Admiral," she reported urgently to command, "I've found something. Their entire fleet is connected through a shared consciousness. If we can overload that network with enough chaotic emotion, we can crash their entire fleet at once," Chen finished. "What do you need?" "Every human in the solar system, all broadcasting at the same time, maximum emotional chaos." Chen nodded grimly. "Activate Operation Cacophony." Across the solar system, every human settlement received the same message. Think about what you love most, and think about it as loudly as possible. On Earth, 8 billion humans began broadcasting their most precious memories. In space stations, colonists shared their hopes for the future. On military ships, soldiers thought about the homes they were defending. The result was a psychic storm unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. Raw human emotion, unfiltered and uncontrolled, crashed against the Zephyrian fleet's shared consciousness like a tsunami of chaos. Ships built to last millennia began falling apart as their crews were overwhelmed by alien feelings they couldn't understand or process. Commander Zarthek felt his mind fracturing under the assault. How could any species survive with such chaotic thoughts? How did humans function with all these random emotions constantly flooding their consciousness? The beauty of human love, the pain of human loss, the simple joy of human laughter. It was all too much for minds bred for psychic discipline. "Retreat!" he gasped. "All ships! Emergency withdrawal to hyperspace." But as the surviving Zephyrian ships attempted to flee, they discovered that their hyperspace navigation systems had been corrupted by human chaos. Ships that tried to jump to safety instead found themselves scattered randomly across the galaxy, their crews struggling to regain sanity in the aftermath of humanity's emotional assault. Of the 5,000 ships that had attacked Earth, less than 300 managed to reach safety. The rest drifted dead in space, their crews either dead or catatonic from psychic overload. On Earth, Admiral Chen stood in the command center watching the alien retreat with grim satisfaction. Humanity had won its second battle against the galaxy's most powerful empire. But she knew this was far from over. "Signal all commanders," she ordered. "Begin Phase 2 of the war plan. It's time to take the fight to them." In the depths of space, the survivors of the Zephyrian fleet limped back toward their home galaxy, carrying with them a message that would shake the Empire to its core. The humans were not just resistant to psychic control, they were capable of turning their own chaotic thoughts into weapons. For the first time in 3 million years, the Zephyrian Empire faced an enemy that could not be broken by force of will alone, and across their vast domain, enslaved species began to whisper about the strange warriors from a small blue planet who had taught the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter what the odds. 2 years after the Battle of Sol, the Zephyrian Empire was dying from within. News of humanity's impossible victories had spread across 17 galaxies, carried by trade routes and communication networks that the Empire could no longer fully control. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved species whispered the forbidden word: rebellion. Emperor Vexithara floated in the ruins of his once magnificent throne room, his crystalline form flickering with unstable energy. The psychic network that had bound his empire together for 3 million years was fragmenting, corrupted by the human chaos that had infected every ship that survived the Sol battles. His own thoughts were no longer entirely his own, contaminated by random human emotions that leaked through the network like poison. "My lord," Admiral Kethmoros approached, his once perfect form now scarred and dim. "The Rigel system has declared independence. The Vegan colonies refuse to answer our communications. And the Proxima garrison—" He paused, struggling with words that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. "They have joined the Human Alliance." The Emperor's rage flared, causing crystal formations throughout the chamber to crack and splinter. "Impossible. The Proximans are loyal servants of the Empire. They would never—" "They broadcast a message, my lord. They said they choose freedom over security. They said they learned this from the humans." Through the vast windows of the Imperial Palace, Vexithara could see the signs of his empire's collapse. Zephyrian ships hung dead in space, their crews driven mad by human psychic contamination. Entire worlds had gone silent, their populations either in rebellion or simply refusing to acknowledge imperial authority. And somewhere out there, moving through space like an unstoppable plague, was the human fleet. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UHSF Defiance, humanity's first purpose-built warship. Around her, displays showed the current positions of the Human Liberation Fleet. 12,000 ships crewed by humans and their alien allies, all broadcasting the chaotic emotional signatures that had become humanity's signature weapon. "Admiral," reported Captain Morrison, who had been promoted after his heroic service during the first contact, "we're receiving surrender requests from the Altair system. The local Zephyrian governor wants to negotiate terms." Chen nodded. It was always the same pattern. The Zephyrians would fight until their psychic coherence broke down, then surrender when they realized their technology couldn't function in the presence of human emotional chaos. Some governors tried to fight to the death, but most chose survival once they understood that resistance was futile. "Standard liberation protocol," she ordered. "Accept their surrender, establish humanitarian aid stations, and help the local population set up their own government. Make it clear we're not here to conquer anyone." Dr. Rebecca Vasquez, now serving as the fleet's chief science officer, looked up from her analysis station. "Admiral, I'm detecting something interesting. The psychic contamination is spreading faster than our actual fleet movements. It's like the Zephyrian network itself is helping us by carrying the chaos to systems we haven't even visited yet." Chen smiled grimly. "Their greatest strength has become their greatest weakness. How poetic." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the human fleet. The psychic network that had allowed the Zephyrians to maintain control over their vast empire was now the mechanism of its destruction. Every time a contaminated ship returned to port, every time a corrupted officer reported to headquarters, the human chaos spread a little further. It wasn't just the technology that was failing. The Zephyrians themselves were changing, their carefully ordered minds struggling to cope with the random emotional patterns they had absorbed from human contact. Some went insane, unable to process thoughts that didn't follow logical patterns. Others became catatonic, their minds shutting down rather than accept the chaotic freedom of human consciousness. But a few, a surprising few, began to understand. Velnaris, former captain of the destroyed Sorrow's Edge, sat in a rehabilitation center on the human colony world of New Geneva. He was one of the lucky ones. His mind had been damaged, but not destroyed by his exposure to human consciousness during the first battle. Now, 2 years later, he was learning to think in ways that would have horrified his former self. "Tell me again about music," he said to his human therapist, Dr. Rachel Kim. Dr. Kim smiled patiently. They had been through this conversation dozens of times, but each repetition seemed to help Velnaris understand a little more about how human minds functioned. "Music is organized sound," she explained, "but it's also emotion made audible. When humans hear music, we don't just process the mathematical relationships between the notes, we feel them. A sad song makes us sad, even if we don't understand why." Velnaris struggled with the concept. In Zephyrian culture, all experiences were shared through the psychic network, filtered and rationalized by the collective consciousness. The idea that individuals could have different emotional responses to the same stimulus was still alien to him. But how do you coordinate anything if everyone feels differently? "We don't always coordinate," Dr. Kim admitted. "Sometimes we argue, sometimes we fight. Sometimes we hate each other, but we also learn from our differences. We grow stronger because we don't all think the same way." As if to illustrate her point, an argument erupted outside the therapy room between two human engineers who disagreed about the best way to repair a damaged atmospheric processor. Velnaris winced at the chaotic emotions, but he was beginning to understand that this chaos wasn't a weakness to be eliminated. It was a source of strength. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the liberation of enslaved worlds continued. Humanity's strategy was unlike anything the cosmos had ever seen. Instead of conquering and controlling, the humans liberated systems and then helped the local populations establish their own governments. They shared technology freely, asked for nothing in return except an end to slavery, and moved on to the next system that needed freedom. The Altarians were among the first species to join the human alliance willingly. Their crystalline forms were similar to the Zephyrians, but they had been enslaved for so long they had forgotten what freedom felt like. When human ships arrived in their system, the local Zephyrian garrison collapsed within hours, their psychic discipline shattered by exposure to human chaos. Ambassador Cathara of Altair stood before the United Human Council on the station orbiting New Earth, her crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy. "We wish to formally request membership in the Human Alliance, not as servants or subjects, but as equals." Admiral Chen, now serving as humanity's primary diplomatic representative, nodded gravely. Ambassador, we need to be clear about something. This alliance isn't about human superiority. It's about freedom for everyone. That means you'll have the right to disagree with us, to make your own decisions, even to leave the alliance if you want to. Cathara's confusion was visible in the shifting patterns of light within her crystalline structure. But what do you gain from this arrangement? Friends, Chen replied simply. Allies. People who choose to stand with us because they want to, not because they're forced to. It's not about power or control. It's about building something better than what came before. The concept was revolutionary. For 3 million years, galactic politics had been about conquest and subjugation. The idea of a voluntary alliance based on mutual respect was so alien that many species initially couldn't understand it. But as word spread, more and more worlds asked to join. The Procyonids, master engineers who had been forced to build weapons for the Empire, instead began designing ships for the human fleet. The Tau Cetians, whose mathematical abilities had been used to calculate optimal slavery quotas, now worked on logistics for the liberation effort. The Vegan colonies, artists forced to create propaganda for the Empire, began producing works that celebrated freedom and diversity. Not every species understood or appreciated humanity's approach. The Rigelians, warrior culture that had served as the Empire's enforcers, initially tried to challenge humans to single combat for leadership of the Alliance. They were baffled when humans suggested instead that they form a joint military council where every species had an equal voice. But perhaps the most dramatic change was happening among the Zephyrians themselves. On the imperial homeworld of Zephyr Prime, civil war had erupted between the Loyalists, who still supported the old order, and the Contaminated, who had been changed by exposure to human consciousness. The Contaminated, led by a former admiral named Thex Mora, had embraced the chaos of individual thought and were fighting to overthrow the psychic collective that had defined their civilization. "We have been slaves to our own perfection," Thex Mora broadcast to both sides of the conflict. "We allowed the collective to think for us, to feel for us, to decide everything for us. The humans have shown us that chaos is not weakness. It is the foundation of growth, of creativity, of true strength." The Loyalist response was swift and merciless. They launched a psychic attack designed to purge the contamination from Thex Mora and her followers. But the contaminated Zephyrians had learned from their human teachers. Instead of resisting the attack, they embraced it, flooding the psychic network with the chaotic emotions they had absorbed. The result was catastrophic for the Loyalists. Their carefully ordered minds, unprepared for the assault of random human thoughts about birthday parties, favorite foods, and childhood fears, simply shattered. In a single moment, 3 million years of psychic tyranny ended as the collective consciousness of the Zephyrian Empire finally collapsed. Emperor Vexithara felt the moment of his empire's death through the failing network. One by one, the connections to his subjects winked out as minds freed themselves from the collective. For the first time in his existence, he was alone with his own thoughts. The experience was terrifying. Without the constant input of millions of other minds, his own consciousness felt small and fragile. How did humans live like this, isolated in their own skulls, forced to make decisions without the guidance of the collective? How did they survive the loneliness? And then, to his surprise, he began to understand. In the silence of his own mind, freed from the constant noise of the collective, Vexithara began to think thoughts that were truly his own. For the first time in 3 million years, he felt curiosity about things that served no purpose for the Empire. He wondered what it would be like to walk on a planet's surface instead of floating in artificial gravity. He imagined what food might taste like if he had never experienced anyone else's memories of eating. He was still contemplating these strange new thoughts when the human fleet arrived at Zephyr Prime. Admiral Chen materialized in the Emperor's throne room via teleporter, accompanied by a small security detail and Dr. Vasquez. The scientific officer's instruments detected the collapsed psychic network immediately. "The collective is gone," she reported. "I'm reading individual thought patterns across the planet. They're finally free." Vexathara looked up at the human admiral who had destroyed his empire and found that he felt no hatred. How could he hate someone who had given him the gift of his own mind? "Admiral Chen," he said, his voice weak but clear, "I surrender my empire to your alliance. Do with it what you will." Chen shook her head. "Your Majesty, that's not how this works. The empire is already gone. What happens next is up to your people to decide. Each world, each individual, gets to choose their own future." "And what of me?" Vexathara asked. "I am responsible for 3 million years of oppression. How many species will demand my death?" "Probably most of them," Chen admitted. "But that's not for us to decide either. If you want to make amends, you'll have to face the people you've wronged and let them judge you." The trials took place on a neutral station built specifically for the purpose. For 5 years, Vexathara stood before representatives of every species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule. Some demanded his death. Others wanted him enslaved as he had enslaved them. A few argued for mercy, saying that he too had been a victim of the collective consciousness. In the end, the verdict was uniquely human in its complexity. Vexathara was sentenced to life in service, not as a slave, but as a free individual choosing to spend his immortal existence helping to rebuild what his empire had destroyed. He would work on restoration projects, aid in refugee resettlement, and use his knowledge of imperial systems to help former slave species reclaim their independence. It was a sentence that would have been impossible under the old order of either absolute punishment or absolute mercy. It was justice tempered by compassion, strength balanced with forgiveness, very human concepts that were slowly spreading throughout the galaxy. 10 years after first contact, Admiral Chen stood in the memorial garden built where the Imperial Palace had once stood. Around her, beings from 100 different species worked together on various projects, their diverse forms and abilities combining to create something beautiful from the ruins of tyranny. Nearby, former Emperor Vexathara carefully tended to a section of earth flowers that had been planted as a symbol of hope. His 4 arms moved with surprising gentleness as he pruned the roses, his crystalline features reflecting rainbow patterns from their petals. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked Chen without looking up from his work. "Everything that's happened? The war, the destruction, the chaos you've unleashed?" Chen considered the question as she watched a group of young beings from different species playing together in the garden's central plaza. Their game had no rules that she could discern. They just ran around laughing and making up new objectives as they went along. Pure, beautiful chaos. Regret ending slavery? Regret giving people the freedom to choose their own destinies? Never. She smiled as one of the children, a young Zephyrian whose crystalline form sparkled with uncontrolled emotions, accidentally knocked over another child and immediately helped them up with touching concern. "The galaxy is messier now, more complicated, but it's also more alive." Vexathara nodded slowly, finally beginning to understand what humans had always known. Perfection was death. Chaos was life. And sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe wasn't energy or technology or psychic ability. Sometimes it was simply the refusal to surrender. The wreckage of the Zephyrian Empire still drifted through space, serving as monuments to the price of absolute power. But from that wreckage, 1,000 new civilizations were growing, each one choosing its own path among the stars. And at the center of it all, on a small blue-green planet in an unremarkable solar system, humanity continued to be exactly what they had always been, gloriously, chaotically, unstoppably free.